off. Otherwise, stay there and look gorgeous, like you all do.
All right, let me move this. Let me click this button. Let me click the share screen button. Let me find the share screen button. Cool. And let me put this thing to stop making noise, because that's rude.
I love your template. Sorry.
Yeah. So open to all feedback. Let me move Heidi's face out of so you guys don't see it. I mean, we love Heidi, but you don't need to see her 3 times. Yeah, new temp. Well, I think I've used this before, but I changed it a little bit. It might be too pink. So if you feel that way, you can put it in the feedback or something, and we'll go from there. But anyways, so hi guys. We're talking about bringing AI into your Power Platform environment. So the goal is to give a little bit of an overview of AI Builder and cognitive services. I am by no means an expert, but I think it's really cool and have been playing with it for a little while, and we're going to do some demos and play around, and it will be fun. So I already introduced myself, but again, I'm Kylie Kiser. I'm a business applications MVP. I've been doing this for 10 plus years. I'm thinking it's coming up on 12 years now. I don't know where the time has gone. And I'm a chapter leader in the Washington, D.C. area. We're all virtual right now, so we would love you guys to come out to our chapter too. And when we're back in person, we're also pretty close to Philly, so we can all go in person as well. So our agenda for today is we're going to give a really high-level overview of AI Builder. We're going to then do a demo of building forms processing, and forms processing is super cool. And I would consider myself on the citizen developer side, right? I am not writing any code, but we're going to be able to build a whole AI model in like just a few minutes. I'm also going to do a few other little demos in there, and then we'll give a very high-level overview of cognitive services and how it's different from AI Builder. And then we'll have some time for questions or whatever else we want to talk about. So let's jump in first, starting with AI Builder. So if you're not familiar with AI Builder, this is part all within the Power Platform. There is some separate licensing for it to be aware of, and there are tools within it that you can take advantage of in Power Automate or in Power Apps or whatever you want. So it's part of the Maker Portal, and it's going to allow you to create these AI models. All of this is point and click, so you're not going to be writing any code. You're not going to need to know anything fancy. And there are some models that are pre-built and some of them that you kind of have to customize and configure. And you can also, these ones that you customize, you can also continue refining them. So if we pop over to wherever I put to this thing, if we pop over here, you can see that we can go to our AI Builder area. So this is just within a Maker Portal, and this was just within a trial that I created. So you can, all of this should be things that you guys can set up in not too long. I mean, I think setting up the trial took, however long, 15 minutes. Setting up my demo took another 15 minutes or half an hour that we're going to look at. But all this stuff that we're looking at here, all of this is just how it comes, right? So you'll see these are the models that you can customize and do a little bit more with them. And you'll see like with each one of them, you can just click on it and it tells you what you need, gives you some more information about it, and even gives you examples of like how you can use it. So that's really cool. And all of these ones at the second half in this Get Straight to Productivity, all of those are things that you can just use. So you don't need to do anything to start taking advantage of these models. So one that we're going to look at, or that I added into the demo, and we'll see if it keeps working, is like sentiment analysis. And you can just determine if some text here is happy or not happy, positive, not positive. We know what that means. So, you can select items here and it tells you if it's negative, or you can add this thing. This chapter meeting is the best. And then, or this one. And then it will tell you kind of the sentiment for that. And this is something you can use directly within your apps or within your flows or within Power Virtual Agents, all that fun stuff. Good thing the demo of just the easy part. Oh, there we go. Positive. Yay. Yeah, so lots of cool things here that you can use. We're also going to look at this identity document reader in a minute. So let's pop back here. So let's talk about forms processing specifically. And I think forms processing is super cool, and that's why I keep talking about it. Basically, what forms processing is let's imagine we have a very manual process, right? Like anytime you go to any government office, right? And they hand you a form, you fill it out, and then you hand it to someone and they type it in a computer. And then there's just so many places for error in that process and just takes so much time. So forms processing helps us get rid of all that. So what happens, right, is you have a handwritten form and it has that data either typed in or handwritten in. And what we can do with forms processing is just read that form and drop that directly into Dynamics or into whatever table we want to in Dataverse or wherever. I mean, we could even put it into Excel or whatever data source we want to connect to. If we're going to get started with this, we're going to need at least 5 sample forms with some kind of varying data so that you can build your model. And you could also have multiple form layouts. So if I have 2 different registration forms that have all the same data points but go to 2 different groups, I could put both of those in the same model. Also, some of the new things that have come out recently are like signature detection, improves for more complex tables, and kind of better defined data types. Also, something I changed on the next slide and didn't update here is like around or they've released updates for being able to have checkboxes on forms and also adding a lot more language support. Previously, we had to only use English characters, but I think that has been updated because now we can support many more languages. There are still some limitations to be aware of, and I did include the link to those limitations in this slide deck, but some more like fillable PDFs and password protected files, right? That's things that we can't be using right now. Cool. So let's jump over to do a quick demo. So let me show you the form we're going to use. So I just have a whole bunch of forms like this guy that were, go away, that we created using silly, funny names. And we're just going to create the model to read all of this data. So the thing to note here is that one thing I was careful of is making sure we left space between these, because if we have fields that are really close together or like our text is overlapping, like that's when things get more complicated, right? So we want to make sure that we have space to see what's going on. So let's jump into our Power Apps, and I'll show you what we're going to build first, and then we'll start and build the whole thing from scratch. So here's an app, right? This is just using a default theme. I can click Analyze, and I'm going to upload one of my samples, forms processing samples. And you'll see as that's analyzing, what's going to happen is it's going to identify each of these fields, and it's going to put a percentage next to them of its confidence in the data or its confidence in my bad handwriting. Excellent. And I'm going to click Submit. And that just drops that data into one of these forms, right? So this is the same out of the box edit form, or new form on Power Apps. We're just going to drop all the data in there, and then we can submit it here. And if we jump over to our dynamics, I have just connected that form with our contact table. So let's refresh this guy, which I didn't refresh this morning. So hopefully it's still alive. And we'll see Chatterbox. That's who we just did, right? And we'll see that record came in right here, right? So super cool. I mean, I think it's so cool. The other thing we put in here that I was playing with last night was hidden page, was around the sentiment analysis like we talked about. So all of this, if we have time, we'll do the demo for this too, or at least I can show you how it's done in this app. But all of these are just using the formula bar in Power Apps, right? So I didn't have to connect to Flow. I didn't have to build models or anything. All of this just kind of works. And so we can do the same thing. The same thing we were doing in the trial. You can test something here. This is one that is supposed to extract all the different items in here. The example they use is, let's meet at Central Park tomorrow. And it tells you, what are the kind of key things it's extracting from this phrase and what type they are, which is just super cool. I don't know how it knows any of this stuff. But anyways, let's jump in and look at how to build this whole model, how to build the forms processing part of this. So to start, we're just going to go to our AI builder. We're going to click on forms processing, and I'm going to call this You'll notice here it walks through, like we said for the other ones, kind of what you're going to need, step by step, examples and best practices, and tells you we need 5 documents for each layout. Let's go ahead and create this. And then it's going to have us add the information to extract. So we know we're going to have 4 fields. So we'll create those. And email. Perfect. Next. And then it's going to have us create a collection. So a collection is just all documents in one layout. So if I had 2 separate documents, I'd create, or 2 separate layouts, I'd create 2 collections. And each of those needs at least 5 examples to train, right? So let's pick some of these 5. And we're going to upload those guys. Excellent. And then we can go and we're going to tag all of those. So what we'll see here is it's going to kind of quickly analyze them, and it's going to identify where there are kind of data points already. And then we can just tag them as what field they are. So you see, it kind of thinks there might be 3 fields here. It's not quite sure what's happening. Some of these, this one's right, first name, last name. We're going to select, just drag and select to select our phone number. And let's do the same for our email because it wasn't sure if those were 2 fields. And we're going to have to do that for each of our documents here. And the one thing you want to make sure is that you have kind of different data in all of these, right? Because if we want to be careful, if all of our samples, for example, had the same date filled in, then it might not identify that as data that could change and needs to be found by the model, right? So we want to make sure that we're capturing that, because you'll see all these things, our first name and last name, they're all the same. That's not, it's like, I don't think this is what you want me to look at. Correct. All right, let's get all these. Yeah. One more. Excellent. All right, we have all that added, and so we're going to train our model. And this is going to go to our model list, and it's going to take a minute to train, and then we'll publish it. So let's go over, and we're going to just set up kind of the shell of our app, and then come back here and publish this guy. We'll go to our app. We're going to create a new app, Canvas, and it's going to be for a phone. We're going to set a theme so it looks different from the other one, so you'll know that I'm not lying to you. And we're going to create a second screen that's going to be our form. And perfect. Let's drop in our forms processing model here. So we can go AI builder, forms processor. If they're telling you it's going to cost money, we'll talk about that later. We'll connect this in 1 second. Also, my favorite feature is using this. Oh, where did the button go? Am I going insane? Yes. Actually, it's probably hidden in here. Never mind. Aha. This align button to put it in the center so I can deal with my OCD. That's what I need. And we're going to put a button down here. And then we're going to come back and work on this in 1 second. So let's save this guy and go check on our model.
Kylie, while you're waiting for that to load, there are some funny comments in the chat that bring
Okay.
up a good point. Your handwriting is pretty good. Have you tested this with some really illegible handwriting, and how does it perform if you have?
That is a good question. I did test this previously. Previously, I think I had my husband fill out some of the forms, and I think the answer is it keeps getting better. But I think you'll even see, like with my handwriting, that there are definitely issues in it, which is why I don't think I'd want to, well, I think what you have to be careful of is if it's a handwritten thing and you're just scanning them and submitting them directly, then, and nobody's looking at them, that makes me a little bit nervous, because I think you almost need someone to do that double check and make sure there's no issues. But the interesting thing is also what's the word I'm looking for? Is there is the score, right? It gives a percentage on how confidence score, that's what I'm looking for, how confident it is in each of the items that's tagged. So like, for instance, we could do something where if the confidence was less than 80%, then flag this for review or something like that. But I think that's a really good call out, and I should try it some more. I need to like send my sample form out to randoms. I'll just drop them off at my neighbor's house. Can you please fill these out with random data?
What you should do? Are you right-handed or left-handed?
I'm right-handed, and my left hand is like useless. It would be an adventure. All of them would come back like 20% sure. Okay, so this is the model we had. Let me push this button, and then we can see if there's any other questions there. So this was the model. We're just going to click publish, and it's going to publish it so we can use it there. Were there any other questions or comments in the chat that we wanted to talk about? Cool. Okay.
Not yet.
All right, we'll give this 1 second to publish, and then we'll jump back to our app. Perfect. All right, here's the guy we were working on. Let's edit him. Let me make sure I have my notes here. Oops, sorry about that. Trying to get that out of the way so I can pull up my notes, make sure I don't break anything. Perfect. So here's our forms processing model, and we are going to connect it with our new live build we just created. And of course, you can use your Alt and click to test as we're building. So let's drop a form in here so that we have some data to see. And we're going to rename this button to submit. And all that's going to happen on this button is it's going to navigate to the next screen where we're going to make use of the forms processing stuff. All right, so you can see our registration form here. It identified some of these things. Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see. It identified those, and you can see the percentage of confidence that it has in each of those items. So let's move to the next page. I'm going to alt click on our submit. And then let's connect to this guy with our contact table. Choose our contacts. And then we'll choose what fields we want to display. Move you. We're going to add our first and last name. First name and last name. Perfect, perfect. And we also want to make sure that this form is set to new. Let's get rid of this title. Don't want to do that. And we're going to put all of the data from our forms processing model into each of these fields. So we're going to unlock here, change our default here to form processor 1. Come on, self. And we're going to just repeat that, excuse me, for each of our fields here. Unlock. And you'll see because we added that form on the first one, then we can see that data as we work, which really makes things easier to know if you're actually doing it right and if it's actually working and all that fun stuff. And this is our phone number, right? Perfect. And so then all we need to do is also update our buttons so that they go where we want them to. So where's our X? He's just going to go back. And then we're going to update our check mark. We want it to submit, but we also want it to reset so that when I go back to my forms processing thing, there isn't any, it's not still showing the old form, right? So we're going to reset this form and reset the form processor. And this is our edit form 1, right? And then navigate to our other screen. All right, so let's test this guy out. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to click play. And we can use the full app. We're going to click analyze, choose a different form, open that. And what's really cool about this is, we've just built this in, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. And if you have the Power Apps app on your phone, you could use this now. And when you click that analyze button, you can choose to upload from your camera or to take a photo, right? So that's really cool. Imagine you're at a booth out in the outside somewhere and people are handing you handwritten business cards. We could use that pre-built model or, entry forms or whatever. And you can just take a picture with your phone, analyze it, upload it, and go to the next person, right? I think that's really cool. Like we said, we're still seeing the confidence there if we needed to use it. and we'll submit this. It shows us everything, and I have the opportunity to correct anything that I need to, and click my check mark, and then we're ready to submit again. Ta-da! I just think that's so cool. Let's save this guy, and then we'll pop back to our presentation. Cool. So next up, I have a quick another driver's license demo using AI Builder via Power Automate. So the models we were looking at so far were the point and click ones, or ones that we could use directly within Power Apps, but you also have some that you can use through Power Automate. So these demo files are available online, and this demo I just downloaded, installed it, and turned on the flow, and then it works, right? Everything you have is in there, so you can take a look at it and try it out. So let's go back here. Oh, yeah, let's publish this guy. Let's go back to our apps, and then we see this driver's license Canvas app. So this is using the identity document reader out of the box model. And like we said, that's all within Power Automate, but you don't need to configure the model at all. You would need to configure how you want to use it in Flow, right? But we're going to upload an existing photo. And there's a whole bunch of sample driver's licenses you can download with this. Let's use Connecticut. Oh, I guess I should use Pennsylvania since we're the Philly chapter. There we go. And then it can process it and pull out all of the data from that driver's license, which I think is interesting. And then you can do it again. And like, this is just coming from, let's pull up that flow quickly. Here we go. I thought we could pull it up quickly. Clearly it's failing on me. Here we go. So within this flow, they're just calling out to the AI builder to get all of that data. I connected you last night. So we're just using AI Builder and we're taking the image from Power Apps, we're dropping that into this AI Builder for the identity documents, and then it's just sending all of that data back, right? So not a super complicated flow, but obviously we could do more in here, right? If we wanted to submit this to Dynamics, or if we wanted to do other work on it, but super cool things that we can do pretty quickly. Cool. So, and that link to download all of these details is in the slide deck too, so you can take a look at it. How am I doing on time? Heidi, am I going till 10:45, right? I have 15 minutes?
Yep.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about AI Builder and about cognitive services, because we've been talking about AI Builder. So cognitive services is what's behind the scenes with AI Builder, right? So AI Builder is our kind of easy point and click way of accessing a lot of these models, but what we don't realize is it's using cognitive services there. So cognitive services could allow us to extend things that we're doing with AI Builder, or do things like more complex. And there's several areas within cognitive services. So they have categories for vision, which are things like computer vision or image processing, and also the face API, like face algorithms, facial recognition, all that fun stuff. Also speech to do like text to talk and translation. We have the language API for doing things like interpreting natural language, or the building questions to answer semi-structured data, like you've seen that in Power BI, just other translation, natural language processing. And then we have decision APIs for things like detecting anomalies, moderating content, personalizing things, and of course, searching to be able to search all this data. And all of this cognitive services can still be low code, right? Just because it's more advanced doesn't mean you necessarily need to be writing code. So one example that I have for you is a presentation that Aiden Cascella and I did excuse me, a little while ago. But basically, the idea was to find which celebrity you look the most like. And so we would use a Power App where we take a picture of someone, and then it's going to take that picture and it drops it in, it gets the details of that picture and compares it with a whole bunch of celebrity pictures that we had in OneDrive using Power Automate and the Face API. And then, of course, displaying that answer back in Power Apps. And that was all low code as well, right? So we did have a custom connector, but everything that was happening in that custom connector was just kind of copying and pasting different keys and things like that from the Face API in Azure. So super cool, but also not super complex. So just some things to keep in mind. In that presentation, I believe I have the link in the deck as well, but that presentation kind of walks through step by step how to do that. And just kind of gives you an idea of some of the other options that you have with cognitive services. So I wanted to look at some of our cognitive services stuff here. Okay. With all these things, we have great documentation. Oh, here is the Canvas app, the driver's license item that you can download. But great documentation here for cognitive services. You can kind of walk through and see all of the different items available, the different things available in these categories. And for each of these items, they do have more information. So you can walk through and kind of test out these apps and see the things that we can do here and how we can figure out how we can use the tools that they have available for us. So lots of good things to check out and lots of great learn content as well that I'd encourage you to look at. So yeah, I just wanted to show all the cool things that you can see here. So
Kylie, there's
the next
comment. Sorry, there's some comments and questions. Do you want them now or when you're done? I don't know if you see.
Yeah, we can ask them now.
Okay. I'll read them out and you can talk. So Jeremy put a comment in that says, seems like the tech itself is not even remotely the hard part. The hard part is learning how to identify all the great opportunities to use it, which a lot of people like and agree with.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts or comments on that or anybody?
Yeah. No, I think you're completely right. Like 100% agree. I think our hard part is figuring out where it makes sense to use this and how to get started. Like I think it's hard for us to sometimes it's hard to see where AI would be beneficial because we're so used to doing it the other way, right? And so when we have to kind of step back and think about where we could infuse this in our business and how many manual processes you have that could be easy to automate, right? Especially when we think about I mean, even silly things, right? Things that you're just used to, like these forms are so easy, but we're used to doing it one way or having someone type everything in and let's see how we could do it better. So completely agree. And I think the kind of next piece related to that is then the cost piece, which we'll talk about in a second is it worth it? And I mean, I think it is, but it's also finding your opportunities, right? Great call out.
Bobby also posted and let us know that McLevin's ID has worked with that driver's license model. So if you want to incorporate that next time.
Cool.
Yeah. Jeremy had another question. If you were using this for document data capture, can you snag a photo of the signature element and pipeline that through this as an image file of just that element along with other process data?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me hold, please. Because I know, where is my deck? No, that's not the one I want. Here. I know that the signature piece is now supported. And do I have a link to it being supported? Rude self, why did you not have a link in here? Let me pull it up. Rude. I wrote about it and then did not save the link, but I know it exists. So let's find it. That's not helpful. It was part of wave 1 signature recognition. So does that mean let's confirm. Here, you're not helpful. Let me follow up on that because I know I have it written down. Signature detection is in wave 1, which would have been wave 1 last year. But what I do not know is how it works with that element.
If you want to keep,
sorry.
I'll keep Googling and looking up in the docs if you want to keep going.
Yeah, I'll find it while Mike's talking for sure. Okay, next question. Was there another one?
That wraps up the questions so far.
Perfect. I just have a few more slides to talk about, which I think the big question that comes up is, okay, like how do I choose between AI Builder and cognitive services? And a lot of that really goes down to who's making it, right? So the AI Builder is more expensive and a little bit confusing, right? Because you pay $500 a month for a certain capacity for so many credits, but like one form isn't necessarily one credit. And depending on the different AI models you're using, your credits are might be different, right? So there is a really cool what's it called? Licensing calculator that I included the link for in here that you can use and say, you know, I want to do 5 forms and I want to do this, and you can kind of figure out how many credits you'll need and what that costs. If you're doing cognitive services, it's more for your developers, fully extensible. It is a cheaper pricing because it's all directly by each transaction, but your trade-off is that you have to build all those models and you can't use the pre-built models. So I think it comes back to who's building it and what are you using it for and justifying that cost and all that fun stuff. But lots of blogs and information available about that. So Eric has a really great kind of deep dive blog comparing them and figuring that out. And then the licensing calculator, like I mentioned, is really cool. And you'll want to take some time when you're using that licensing calculator to review some of the assumptions that they're making in there, because some of these are, you know, it'll say that you're using your forms. Let me just show you. You'll see you're using, let's use our form since we were talking about that. You know, we can say we're going to process, let's say 100 pages a month, and we can calculate that. And it says, okay, that's all within your $500 fee. And it's going to be in blocks of that 500, right? So as soon as you go over your credits, then it goes there. But you want to keep in mind that it's going to say, you know, there are some assumptions in here around we're processing each page counts as one form. And I think somewhere for some of these anyways, it talks about like this includes so many fields or sentences of a certain length and kind of some assumptions in there. So just because you get a certain answer from this calculator, it might not necessarily align with your business. So just kind of be aware of that, right? And that's all I have. So we can do some questions if there are any more. I also have a whole bunch of links in here to a whole bunch of stuff. And the slide deck should just have posted to my blog a few minutes ago. And so you should see it on Twitter and all that fun stuff. So if you want to download it and get all these resources, they should be there. And definitely encourage you guys to connect with me. And I'd love to, share more about this. As I said, I don't think I'm an expert in all these things, but I think it's super interesting. So I enjoy learning about it, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed this presentation too. So yeah, so now we have 4 minutes if there are any other questions.
I found that link that you were looking for at Docs. I put it in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
And I have a thought that I posted in here as well. So I haven't implemented this for anybody yet. We work mostly with small to medium-sized businesses, and I feel like the pricing model is a little cost restrictive for those smaller organizations. So it feels like this is something that would be for like a larger company, like the Independence Blue Crosses of the world, and less for the smaller ones. Is that kind of what you see as well in where you've implemented it?
Yeah, and that makes me sad. Because, well, I haven't I have played with this for myself and I think it's awesome, but I haven't implemented it for anybody in a production scenario yet, which makes me sad because I think it's so cool, but I think it's exactly what you said. They're worried that it's going to be too expensive, or whatever. And I think some of that we have to work on being able to better justify this and show the differences in costs, because $500 a month sounds like a lot. But I mean, if you're paying Susie to manually type in data from forms and she's working part-time, she costs more than $500 a month. And we don't want to say fire Susie and pay for forms processing. But, maybe Susie could be spending her time in a more valuable way, right? So I hope that it's not. I don't want it to be only for large companies, but I think that it's just that justification becomes a little bit harder. Or it might be a case that the smaller companies do want to look at cognitive services, because you could build a full forms processing model using cognitive services. It just wouldn't be the same point and click way. And then it would probably be cheaper for them. So there are some other options in there.
Yeah. So there's a question from Philip. Sorry about the dog. Do you know what happens if you hit the limit? Does it hard stop working? It's a great question.
I don't think so. I think you just get charged the next level, but I'm not sure, because I know with I have another pricing information in here. This is the wrong thing. Licensing. Let's see if this is what I'm looking for. I think you purchase your add-on and then do you get paid? I think with most of these things, you do not. I'll drop this link in the chat too. With most of these things, they don't cut you off, but they get mad at you and bill you later.
That's what they do with Flow, so I'd assume
Yeah,
this would be.
I think it's the same. If I exceed, no, I don't care about trials. I want to know if I exceed my, what can I do?
Hey, while you're looking for that, Tristan just added a comment. He implemented this in a production environment.
In real life? Oh, I'm so happy.
Right? Their manual process was not their job, but it was taking up all of their time. So you made Susie happy, Tristan.
We
gave her
made
something
Susie
better
happy.
to do.
I'll drop that link in there to the chat. But from my understanding, yeah, it's the same as Flow. If you go over, then you just get charged the next thing. which I guess could be good, but getting charged $500 when you don't expect it is probably not very fun.
No, probably not.
But you can check it in your capacity. When this is not enough, you can complete it with one or several AI builder add-ons. Yeah.
And Jeremy shared the pricing in BC, which is sad. We're going to ignore that you put that there. I don't know why Dynamics and Power Platform is so much more.
Oh, man.
So thank you, Kylie, for an awesome presentation. I'm sure if you guys have more questions, you can put them in the chat and Kylie can answer them. But Mike, we're going to transition over to you so you can take the stage if you're ready.
Thanks, Kylie. And thank you, Heidi. Let me share my deck here. And probably should have started that first. All right. So,
Mike, real quick, we can see your presenter screen instead of the main screen.
All right, let me try that again. Teams.
Perfect.
There we go. Okay. All right. So today we're going to talk about the ALM Accelerator for Power Platform. The ALM Accelerator for Power Platform is an app that is part of the COE Starter Kit that's developed by the PowerCat team within Microsoft. The PowerCat team is an entity within the engineering organization in Microsoft. However, they are a team that essentially works with some of Microsoft's biggest customers to provide feedback into the engineering org at Microsoft for issues with the platform and things like that their largest customers are dealing with. And one of the things that came out of that charter for the PowerCat team is building tools in the COE Starter Kit to sort of fill gaps in the platform. In the meantime, while the engineering department is working on actually building them into the platform, the PowerCat team is building the COE Starter Kit and these tools in the COE Starter Kit to fill those gaps in the meantime. And all of the COE Starter Kit is built on top of Power Platform, so there's no hooks into undocumented APIs and things like that, or hooks into the platform itself. It's simply built on top of Power Apps and flows and Dataverse, like so many of us do every day. With that being said, a quick introduction of myself. I'm Michael Ochs. I'm a business applications MVP. I do have a cold, so if I sneeze or I sound like I'm talking through my nose today, that's why. In addition to that, I'm a consultant at Excellence. We're a small consulting firm down here in the DC area. And there is my sort of contact information if you want to reach out to me after this. And I've been working for the past year, a little over a year, on the PowerCat team within Microsoft as a vendor. So this is sort of my baby, and I've pretty much focused all of my attention on the ALM Accelerator for the past year that I've been with Microsoft. All right, so we're gonna, this is the agenda. It's a pretty short agenda. This is gonna be, the majority of this is gonna be demos. We'll level set here in the beginning about what application lifecycle management is. I'm sure a lot of you, even if you're not familiar with the term, realize that you need application lifecycle management in your development process. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is just to level set. We're going to talk about what the ALM Accelerator for Power Platform is. That's going to be, what problem does it solve specifically? What problems doesn't it solve? From a full end-to-end sort of DevOps and process. And then we'll also dive into a demo on what the ALM Accelerator today, as of actually Tuesday, we released a new version, and we have docs on Microsoft Docs now. We have some videos that I'll point you to, and we've got a new release that just came out that sort of that we'll talk about the idea behind it, but essentially we've targeted the ALM Accelerator to be useful for not just advanced sort of makers who understand Git source control and pipelines in Azure DevOps and sort of those, some of the esoteric stuff that is, development focused, but we've built it to also appeal to just the standard maker or a maker who's not familiar with those things, and give them the ability to deploy their work and source control it and things like that. All right, so what is application lifecycle management? Application lifecycle management is essentially the idea that you can take a piece of work that you are working on as an individual, as a maker, or a team of makers are working on, and pull that into a single place and ultimately deploy that into downstream environments. So makers can have their individual development environments. You could have a single development environment or maker environment for a solution that you're building. And you can take that work, and on a regular basis, you can commit that work into source control so that you have a history of what you've done, and you have a sort of a human readable format for that work. So one of the big challenges in the Power Platform in particular is that, the work that you do is kind of combined into a solution file, and you can expand that solution file, and you can sort of see some of the XML files in there and things like that. But there are other pieces of the Power Platform that don't necessarily have that sort of human readable ability. Things like apps, right? An MS app, when you export a solution for a Canvas app, it puts a .ms app file, which is essentially a binary file, into your solution. And even if you expand that zip file, it's not readable, and it's not easy to go in and look at the code or anything like that. You can still deploy it into a downstream environment, but the idea here is that you have some checks along the way to be able to actually see the code that's being written and the changes that are being made. So that being said, once your makers are comfortable with the idea of committing often to source control, and they don't necessarily have to know what's going on there, but it's useful from the standpoint of administrators and reviewers to be able to look at that stuff when a deployment happens. But once they've done that and they've committed that work into source control, the ALM Accelerator and the application lifecycle management process is to push those things into a downstream environment. And when we look at the inner loop versus the outer loop here, the inner loop is a developer building in their space, a maker building in their development environment, iterating on that, testing locally, and then ultimately pushing that work out to a downstream environment. So what ALM is the planning requirements documentation. It's not necessarily tied into environment management, but there's a half kind of strike through here on this slide because there's a little bit of environment management going on in ALM. We don't handle environment management specifically in the ALM Accelerator, but the COE Starter Kit does have an environment management tool in it that allows makers to request environments for their development work, for them to request test environments and production environments and things like that. But it is that inner loop, outer loop. And then as far as configuration, there's a lot of configuration associated with deploying a solution nowadays. There didn't used to be. And back in the Dynamics 365 days, when ALM was pretty well handled just by solutions. There were certain things like data that still to this day, we can't do. We can't push data in a solution for lookup tables and things like that. But for the most part, our plugin code, our TypeScript, JavaScript code, and things like that would go along for the ride in a solution. Nowadays, with Power Platform, not all of those things that we need to do in those downstream environments to get a working solution are handled by the solution itself. So There's a little bit of configuration that has to go on. A lot of it has been manual, unfortunately, and a lot of people are doing things like going into downstream environments and creating connections for their Power Apps and their flows, and doing things that are not good ALM practice, but the platform hasn't provided a way to sort of handle those situations. The platform is actively working on that, but what we've built in the ALM Accelerator is filling those gaps for the time being. All right, so here's kind of what we're going to look at in the ALM Accelerator today. This is, again, as the title implies, this is a day in the life of a Power Platform maker team. A maker does their development in that inner loop. They will be using the ALM Accelerator app to commit often their work that they've done, and then ultimately they will deploy to those downstream environments that you see on the right-hand side. And this is sort of the process of that. The process involved with the ALM Accelerator as the app being used to do the ALM process. So we've got our ALM Accelerator Canvas app here. We've got Azure DevOps sitting in the middle, and the ALM Accelerator today works based on Azure DevOps. There is work going into it to, let me just minimize this right here. There's work going into it to provide GitHub support as well. But today, Azure DevOps is sort of the backing engine behind the ALM Accelerator. But there's work going on in this development environment. The maker is pushing constantly through Azure DevOps using pipelines in Azure DevOps via the ALM Canvas app. And then there's a deployment step in here, and there's an approval. And that's important because while the maker's doing development, there's really no approval necessary. I can do as much development as I want, but at the point that I decide I'm going to push this into a production environment, or I'm going to push it into a test environment, there needs to be an approval by somebody that says, yes, this is okay to be pushed into that environment. And we also want, at that point in time, to be able to do some sort of automated testing or automated validation that solution is able to be pushed into a downstream environment, to avoid sort of the gotchas of, okay, this is ready for testing, it goes to build and it just fails on import. Or there are warnings in the solution checker, for example, that shouldn't allow this to be pushed into a downstream environment. So the Azure pipelines that sit behind the ALM Accelerator sort of handle some of those automated things, but ultimately it's up to an individual to go into Azure DevOps and approve those things manually in our sort of default setup. Now there's flexibility in our pipelines to sort of bypass that. If you're, a very small shop, if you're only one person doing development, you just want to push things and there's nobody else there to approve it, you absolutely can do that. But our sort of out of the box pipeline configuration and the way the app expects things to be set up there is that approval step somewhere in the middle.
Hey, Mike, quick question. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to take questions as they come in? Because there's a lot of questions in the chat on that slide.
Yeah,
they're all from Nick. So if you want them, maybe he can just come off mute and ask them.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sorry, I'm blowing up chat.
I'm going through this pretty quick. And I understand that there may be questions. I don't know everybody's level of understanding of this stuff. So it is good to kind of get those questions answered up front.
Yeah, I'm pretty technical, so if this is more deep dive, but this is a pretty technical session. I've done this before, so I've looked at it, and the pull request, is it just XML diff changes? Like, is there anything you can actually see in there?
Yes, so you can see pretty much everything that's in the solution with some additional information as well that we'll look at when we look at the accelerator. But you can see the JSON flow. So flows expand to JSON, and you can see the changes to a flow in the JSON. You can see,
but I've seen like,
changes, but
okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
I've seen like a lot of like weird structural changes where like change orders of things and stuff like that. Is that ignored, or is that still there? Is there a lot of noise in these things?
There's still a lot of noise, and to be perfectly honest with you, we've done our best to in our pipelines kind of eliminate some of that noise, but a lot of that it's a platform limitation at this point that we just can't work around. Like we've tried to like sort XML documents to make, to make those diffs a little bit less noisy. And ultimately what happened was we couldn't import a solution that got repacked with that XML sorted, which makes absolutely no sense. But there are limitations, known limitations in the platform that we can't work around. But we've done our best wherever possible to
Okay. But you can work around that if you can actually. So when you put these out for review, is there like a test environment that's specific for each feature branch so you can test them in isolation from each other?
It depends on how you want to set it up, right? Like so, and we'll look at that too. It depends on how you want to set it up, and it is flexible enough to allow for what you just described. You could also have a single test environment that has all of your solutions in it. One of the things that it does immediately when you create a pull request is it kicks off a build to deploy to a what we call a validation environment. And that's sort of the sanity check that I was talking about, where let's just make sure this thing can be deployed. Nobody went in and mucked with the XML and messed something up there. And let's just validate that this thing can be pushed to another environment before we push it into a test environment, for example. But yeah, there is flexibility within the app and the pipelines to be able to do either what you described or have a single environment for testing.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry, I've looked at this a while ago, and I'm just like, all these things came up, like especially the two developers working on the same thing. How do you merge that together if you can't sort the XML? Like, how do you hope to merge those together in Git?
Yeah, I'll be perfectly honest with you. The advice that Microsoft gives is that every developer should be working in their own isolated development environment. The truth of the matter is that the platform does not really support that that way of doing things. And the way that we do development internally, to be honest with you, with the COE starter kit, and just as a heads up, this was built so that we could do ALM with the COE starter kit. But that being said, the way we do development is we have a single development environment for each of our solutions, and everybody sort of does development within that environment. And then ultimately that gets pushed into source control, because that's, that prevents that noisy diff and trying to merge two branches from different environments.
Is there any sort of automated testing at all in this space?
No. Short answer
Okay.
Short answer is no. The longer answer is we are working on it, and we're working on it with the product team, and we're also potentially working on some gap fillers there in the meantime, because the COE starter kit has gotten to a point where we have to have something in the automated testing realm for us to be able to maintain quality, because the COE starter kit is doing monthly releases at this point, and they've probably got 6-7 solutions that they deploy on a monthly basis, and then we're rolling in the ALM Accelerator and other solutions as well. So it has gotten critical with the automated testing, and but it's definitely a known sort of gap in the platform right now.
Sounds like you guys are finding the painful parts here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I won't hold you up. You keep going. This is great. Thank you, Mike.
Yep. Yeah, we're eating our own dog food here. So this has to work for the COE starter kit. And it was, like I said, originally built for the COE starter kit, and then we sort of decided that we were going to put it out for other people to use as well. So this is the ALM Accelerator, and ALM Accelerator for Power Platform. And we had, and this is just a little bit of history, and I don't know if it's important or not, but in the COE starter kit, there was previously 2 accelerators that we had. We had an accelerator that was called the ALM Accelerator for Makers, and we had one called the ALM Accelerator for Advanced Makers. And recently we decided to sort of merge those 2 into one. And that's what I was talking about earlier with we've created the ability to provide experiences for a specific maker, where, for example, I'm in the Advanced Maker experience right now. I am Johanna. Johanna's an administrator in this environment, so Johanna actually has access to all of the experiences. But what would normally
happen? We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, sorry, I'm still sharing. let me share the screen. I've been sharing the, there we go. Sorry. So logged in as Johanna. Johanna can see all of the experiences and can actually use this drop down to toggle between them. And under normal circumstances, I really need to switch the screen I'm on here. I apologize, guys. It's kind of messing me up a little bit. Let me share my other screen. Okay, that's better. Now I can look at you guys at the same time. So under normal circumstances, these experiences would be assigned to a specific user. Like I said, as an administrator, I can see all of them. So I have that drop down over here where I can kind of toggle between them, right? Here's my advanced maker, here's my maker experience. And you'll see that some of this stuff lights up and turns off based on the experience I've chosen. But if I look at what this is, I'm logged in as Nat on this window, you can see that goes away. So Nat's been assigned the maker experience. She doesn't have necessarily the amount of functionality that an advanced maker has, but there's also less confusion about what needs to, less possible confusion on the maker part about what needs to happen and what they're allowed to do. So things like delete a solution. We may not want to allow a maker to delete a solution, so we can turn that off in the maker experience. Importing solutions. This allows you to import a solution from source control. So a solution that's already been persisted by someone else into source control or by yourself. You can actually import that solution back into your development environment as an unmanaged solution and kind of work from a version that was stored in source control. And the combination of this delete solution and the import solution kind of gives you the ability to, if you've made a bunch of changes, you've messed something up, and you just need to start from the last time you committed into source control, you can go and delete this solution and then import from source control. And the delete solution, the reason we have that there is actually a pipeline in Azure DevOps that allows you to, that actually goes in, exports the unmanaged solution as managed, imports that back, and then deletes the solution. And the reason it does that is that's sort of a workaround where if you try to delete an unmanaged solution, even from Solution Explorer, it just deletes the container, and all of the components that were in that solution remain in your environment. And so if you're really trying to wipe out a solution completely, you have to go through that process of export as managed, import over the unmanaged, and then delete it. So the first thing you'll see when you come into the ALM Accelerator is you'll get this drop down for your maker environment. This is your dev environment, if that's a more familiar term, but this is where you would have your unmanaged solutions and where you would be doing your development work. When you select that, it's going to populate this list with all of your unmanaged solutions in that environment. And again, these are all of the things that I can dev on or I can make changes to. We've got a button up here to manage solutions. So this the idea behind this is to put makers in a place where they can do healthy ALM. And the only way to do healthy ALM in the Power Platform today and going forward is by using solutions. So if you're building an app, if you're building a flow, if you're building a table, whatever it may be, they have to be in solutions in order for the ALM Accelerator and the majority of tools out there to be able to export those things into a source control format and deploy them into a downstream environment. So the idea here is that you have a maker, you kind of introduce them to the maker process by using the ALM Accelerator, dropping them directly into the Solution Explorer. They can do all their work from here. So I can create a Philly UG solution here, right? Let's give it, it'll be PowerCat will be the publisher. Go ahead and create it. And there we go. I created one earlier, but this is the one we just created. I'm going to go ahead and I'll add something to this real quick. Let's add an app. All right. skip that for now, and I'm just going to insert a label. All right. So that's good enough for now. Sort of demonstrate how this or how this works. All right, close that. And if we come back to the ALM Accelerator, we'll see that we now have, this was the one I created earlier, but here's the one that I just created. So my unmanaged solution shows up there. First thing I have to do after I create a new solution, I've got all of these buttons are disabled. I can't really do anything with this solution until I choose a profile. And so profiles are essentially and this goes to the question that came up earlier. The profiles essentially tell the app where, or the pipelines and the app, where the source control for this solution is going to be. So our DevOps organization project repository, a target branch for pull requests. So if I select, for example, the COE starter kit profile, you can see I've got these filled in, and I've got an option here that would likely be set up by an administrator. These profiles would be, but the idea behind use solution branches is, and this is getting into the weeds pretty far and a little technical, but the use solution branches will essentially create a branch per solution in your target repository and sort of name that branch after the solution itself. Now, I have the ability to say I want to use solution branches, and what that's going to do is going to create a Philly UG branch in my Azure DevOps repo, or I can say I want to target main directly, right? And but what we'll see is that the target branch is essentially where, when we create that pull request, or when we create that request to deploy, where we're going to target, but all of the development work always happens in an isolated branch for the maker themselves. And then in addition to that, we have our deployment environments. So in this case, to the question earlier, right, I've got a profile here that I'm using across multiple solutions. I've got a single test environment I'm going to deploy all those solutions into. However, if I wanted to create a specific profile for this solution to deploy into a new development or a new test environment that I have, I can easily do that as an administrator in the advanced maker experience. And I can say, this is just the Philly, it's going to be the Philly UG profile. And then I can select my organization, my project. It's not that one. Let's do this one. Repository. I'm going to use solution branches. I'm going to create this. And that's going to go out. It's going to create a profile specifically for the Philly UG. It's going to populate these downstream environments. Now, these are the default sort of configuration for our pipelines and for the ALM Accelerator. These are flexible in that these can be actually, and this is sort of a quick start way of creating a profile. However, if we go back and look at real quick, the ALM Accelerator for Power Platform Administration, what you'll see is here's my Philly UG profile that I just created. And this is all sort of stored in the background and able to be configured by an administrator. And you can see I've got my 3 steps here, but if I wanted to add a 4th, I can absolutely do that. I can link that to another environment. So if I had say not a UAT, but a staging environment, I could create a new step. And that would give me the flexibility to use more than just the 3 environments that come out of the box. There would be a little bit of manual setup on the pipeline side and Azure DevOps to do that, but it does have that flexibility. All right, I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna go back and I'm gonna pick this one.
Like, if this is all inside of a Canvas app like this,
yes.
Can it be used in like CI or like, any kind of automation? Like, can you use this in an Azure DevOps pipeline, or do you have to use this Canvas app?
So the pipelines are So this is sort of, it's a great question. The Canvas app is a layer over top of the pipelines that we've built. The pipelines can be used independent of this app. Essentially, all this app does is surface status from Azure DevOps, so you can kind of see the status of the commits and the pull requests and things like that. It surfaces that status, but it also provides a layer for kicking off pipelines in Azure DevOps. So to your question, yes, you can use the pipelines independent. You would just have to have some other layer, or you would have to manually enter the variables when you kick off the pipeline. This just provides sort of an easy layer over top of those pipelines.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Great question. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this solution. And this is the advanced maker experience for a commit. And you can see I can create a new branch. I can pick an existing branch. If I toggle this off, I can specify the name of the new branch. So this will be, we'll just say Philly UG branch, and I'll put my initials in front of it. And this will be based on main initially, and I'll just put in test. And I can go ahead and start preparing this solution. Or in the case Advanced Maker, you can actually bypass prepare, but I'll show you what this looks like. So if we hit prepare, what this does, and this is not the best example because all we have is a Canvas app in here, but what this does, the prepare step, is it actually goes out and it looks at all of the flows, all of the Canvas apps, all of the connection references that are in my solution, and it gives me an interface on top of this to set those things ahead of time. So I'm going to back out of here and let's look at another one that has a little bit more interesting stuff in it. So I'm going to prepare this one instead, because this one actually has connection references and flows and things like that. The other one just had a Canvas app in it. It's a little bit laggy, simply because it's going out and it's using flows in the back end to actually query for all these things. It's also going into downstream environments and looking for things like connections in those downstream environments to be able to wire those up. So here we go. We've got our 3 environments up here. These are all of the connection references that are in our solution. I've got a Dataverse and a SharePoint connection reference. These are the connections in the downstream environment that I can actually assign to these connections when it's deployed into this environment. If I run over to the test environment, for example, see same connection references, but now I've got a bunch more connections. Unfortunately, these connections are all named the same, which is a platform limitation. But if, for example, let's go and click on this one. This actually takes me into my test environment. If I delete this in that environment, yeah, okay, it's being used by something else. That's fine. And come back here. So now I get to 11:30, right? So.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so now you can see this is not connected in that test environment. And I actually have the ability to create a new connection. Again, it's going to go down into that test environment. I can create that. Sign in. All right, and once that's created, I come back here, hit refresh again. Give it a second. There we go. So now we have it wired up to that connection that we just created in that downstream environment. There's also the ability to request a new connection. So if you don't have permissions in that downstream environment, you can ask others. So I could ask Joni, for example, to, hey, Joni, go and create a connection for this. That's just going to pop a Outlook window for me and say, hey, Joni, can you reestablish this connection? That's going to actually bring Joni into this screen and allow her to create that connection on my behalf. All right, so environment variables. Again, we set these for each of the environments that we're going to deploy into downstream. We've got standard string, number, decimal, JSON type variables here that we can fill out. We've also got our data source environment variables that we can specify. So I can actually go in here and change this to a different SharePoint site, and that will populate the lists from that SharePoint site. And so I can set those in the downstream environment as well. Apologize. As far as app sharing, we've only got one app in this particular solution. If we had more than one, they'd all be listed here. I can share these apps with AAD groups. So these are all of my AAD groups I have access to. So I can say I want to share it with this advanced maker group. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's go back to that. And I can actually see who's in that group from this view.
That's really cool. Can you configure that to be like pre-filled automatically?
Once you save these settings, they're persisted as throughout the life of the solution. So once you set this, yeah, you'll be able to reuse them over time. And as new components, obviously, you add new components to your solution, those components will show up in this screen as well, and then you can configure those. So I can specify the permissions for that downstream environment, what I want these users to be able to do in that downstream environment. And then the last thing is component ownership. These are flows in our solution, and you can essentially set the owner of the flow. Now, all of our pipelines run as a service principal. That's a headless, licenseless user that essentially, when things are imported by that user, they tend to get owned by that user. And if you want your flows to be owned by a specific user in the downstream environment, you can actually specify a Dataverse user here that will own that in that downstream environment. And if I hit save and close, that's going to bring me back to my commit dialog, and I'm ready to actually push this. So we'll commit it. And that's going to kick off a pipeline in Azure DevOps to unpack the solution, to put it into source control. It's going to source control all of that information I just gave it in that deployment settings screen. So if we drill into this, we can actually see the pipeline running on the back end. And there's quite a few steps that it goes through. To one of the questions earlier, and it's kind of queuing up right now, one of the questions earlier about running this without the UX on top of it. You can see, for example, these are all of the parameters that the app itself are passing into this pipeline. So information about the branch to create or the branch to use, these deployment settings records, et cetera. So there's quite a few steps in here. I think one of those steps is actually to format JSON files. So again, to the other question about where we've tried to make things source control friendly as much as possible, we do format JSON files. Unfortunately, we aren't able to format XML files, but there is work going on in the platform all up to make solutions more source control friendly. So I can let you know that. I have no idea what the sort of timeline is on that, but Microsoft is definitely aware of it.
This is awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, really, really valuable work.
Thanks. So once we've committed a solution, you can see I hadn't committed this before, so my deploy is turned off, but this is actually the app. This is the app that we're using right now. And you can see I've committed this. I can actually, if I drill into this, this may not be the best example. I can actually see everything that's happened as far as commits and deployments, and I can see who did it. And obviously, I've done quite a bit on this myself as Johanna. This is our development environment. But if we look at another one, for example, let's look at this one. This is probably a better example. We can see that this is the commit that's happening right now by Johanna. We can see that Graham did a deployment of this back on November 14th, et cetera. So we can kind of see the history of what's happened with this. And this is available whether you're in the Advanced Maker or the Maker experience. And it just kind of gives you an idea of what's happened with these particular solutions. And that can be either they're working, on this collaboratively, or they want to pull back a version. So if I'm, for example, when I was describing before about the delete and then import, if I know that, hey, Graham went on vacation, for example, or Johanna went on vacation and something got messed up, and I need to either go back through source control or roll back to the last time I committed it as Graham. I can see, I can see specifically what that branch was that I pushed to, and import back from that branch. So that's useful. What else is there? And we're about out of time. We got 4 minutes left. I haven't shown the deploy yet, so let's find one that we can deploy. That was a bad example. Let me switch this over real quick. Put this back on COE Starter Kit. All right, so this is a deployment dialog, and it looks somewhat like the commit dialog because we're in the Advanced Maker scenario. It's got title, notes, my source branch. So this is the branch that I last committed to, and this is where I want to ultimately create a deployment pull request into. So I'll just put a test on this. We'll click deploy solution. Oh, branch no longer exists. All right. No, we have an issue there. Let me go back to this actually. I think that's the problem. Huh. All right, well, something went wrong there. Not sure what my deployments are. Got wiped out here. Let's try this one. Just want to show you the different experience. So the difference between the sort of advanced maker deployment and the maker deployment is that we don't have the branches here. We don't have to specify a source branch and a target branch, but we can actually just point to a downstream environment. And the way that works is that it automatically knows what our target branch is because we specified it in the profile. And it also knows where we last committed the solution to. And so it will create a pull request on our behalf based on that information and the target environment. So there are two types of approvals. There are pull request approvals, and there are what we call environment approvals, or what Azure DevOps calls environment approvals. And the difference between the two is that if you have this set up as an environment approval, it'll actually kick off the associated pipeline for that environment automatically. But you have to, in Azure DevOps, you have to put a policy on that environment to say that it requires an approval. So it'll automatically kick off a deployment pipeline, but it'll wait until that deployment pipeline gets approved, which is different from a pull request because there's no code review involved in that. And the reason that we have those two different ones is, for example, you do a pull request to your test environment. Somebody looks at that code, that asset gets built, it gets pushed into your test environment. And then what happens is somebody goes in and tests it. They say, this looks good. All right, let's deploy it to prod. We don't necessarily want to have to go through that build process again. We just want to deploy that asset that we just created in the test environment to the production environment. So that's why there's two different sort of approval types in that case. But that's pretty nuanced stuff. So and that's about it. I think we can probably take questions at this point.
You've got a question from Philip in there. It says, what are your thoughts on hot fixes? I assume it's fix forward rather than using patches.
Yes, well, we do. In COE Starter Kit, we fix forward. So, and I don't know if the question is specifically about patches, the concept of patches within the source control infrastructure. I would recommend against using patches. They're it might be a little inside baseball, but I don't know if patches are going to have much of a life going forward. The idea is that at some point the source control, or sorry, the solution system will be smart enough to know what's changed within a solution from version to version, and you won't necessarily need patches. It's because it'll be more of a smart sort of deployment. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Poor patches. They never even got a shot. I used patches. I liked them. Philip,
you?
feel free to come off mute if you had more questions about that.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, yeah, that sounds fine. We've been trying to get people to fix forward and avoid patches. So yeah, that sounds like good news. Thanks.
Yep.
Take them away. Take the question away. Yeah.
Nick, do you want to come off mute and ask yours?
Sure. Yeah, it's sort of related to that in that you have it doesn't seem like long running branches are a good idea on this, given the merge issues. If it gets too diverged, it's gonna be too hard to bring them back together.
Yeah.
So feature flags, like rolling out features, they're going to be part of the branch, but not there. Is there any sort of thinking around how to disable features until they're fully ready?
There is some as far as model-driven apps, I think, that were recently announced. I know the Canvas apps still don't have, you kind of have to roll your own as far as features go. So yeah, again, we haven't really addressed that issue. I think that the platform plans to address it, but yeah, as it's a good point. We tend to try to we tend to try to merge often, but yeah, and merge on a sort of work item by work item basis and have small sort of chunks of work grouped together to ensure that we don't put a bunch of stuff out that's not ready for release. But yeah, it's a problem.
Thank you.
Why were you laughing, Heidi? Oh, we don't need no stinking patches.
Yeah, I'm glad I was on mute because I really laughed out loud at that. It caught me unawares, or I wasn't ready for that. Thanks, Scott. Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, Mike, thank you so much. This was really an awesome presentation. Thank you. Thank you. And for the few of you that stuck around till the end, our next meeting is going to be April 15th. Save the date. We'll plan on virtual and be really excited. I'll come back on my camera. We'll be really excited if we get to meet back on person. Look how bright it is now in Philly. It's always sunny in Philadelphia, right? And email me. I'll put my email in here if anyone doesn't have it. Well, no caps. With any topics you want to learn about. And then we can keep having awesome speakers talk about the things that you want to learn about. So thank you. And have a great weekend. Yay, Friday.
Thanks,
Great to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you in
Thanks,
April
everybody.
if I don't see you before then.
Bye.
Bye.
That was a great presentation. Thanks, Mike.